there's a tree in the world that can produce 40 different kinds of fruit. Or there's a tree that glows at night without electricity or batteries. And there's even a tree that survived a massive explosion and became a symbol of hope. In this video, we'll get to know 10 trees, each with a strange and unbelievable story, and we're going to see how these unique trees manage to challenge the laws of nature. In the heart of Oklahoma stands a tree whose story shakes anyone to the core. On April 19, 1995, a massive explosion occurred at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, claiming the lives of 168 people. The American elm tree that stood in the parking lot next to the building was also severely damaged. Its branches were burned. Glass and metal became embedded in its trunk, but not only did this tree survive, it also became a symbol of resilience and hope. Interestingly, at one point they considered cutting it down to retrieve any evidence that might have remained in its bark. But now its branches have spread wide, and it has a majesty that shows even when everything seems lost, there is still hope for life. This tree is a reminder that we should never give up on surviving. A little before the first anniversary of the bombing, someone noticed that this tree was coming back to life, and that's when people gathered around it and supported it. They even gave the tree a name, the Survivor Tree. Today, this tree, which is estimated to be about 100 years old, stands at the center of the Oklahoma National Memorial and receives special care. For example, after a winter storm, the staff at the center clear the snow off its branches, and even its pruning is done with great care to preserve its natural shape. It's interesting to know that every year, saplings are grown from this tree's seeds. But now, anyone can have a piece of this legacy for themselves, and in this way, the message of hope and life continues. Let's move on to the next tree, the tree of 40 fruits. Imagine having a tree that produces peaches, plums, apricots, nectarines, cherries, and almonds all at the same time. This strange idea was brought to life by an artist and Syracuse University professor named Sam Van Aken. Using grafting techniques, he grafted branches from 40 different types of fruit onto a single rootstock. The result is a tree that dazzles the eyes in spring with its colorful blossoms and produces a variety of fruits in the summer. This project is not only a work of art, but it also helps preserve rare fruit species. Number 3 on our list is glow-in-the-dark trees. Imagine if we could have trees that light up at night without needing electricity. Dutch designer Don Roosgaard, deeply inspired by nature and carefully using biomimicry, is actively developing innovative trees that produce their own light using genes from naturally luminous creatures like fireflies. These trees could replace streetlights and create a beautiful, poetic atmosphere. Although this project is still in its early stages, it promises a bright future. So far, we have truly gotten to know 3 of the world's most unusual and fascinating trees. But these remarkable trees are just a small part of nature's incredible and diverse magic, a truly wondrous phenomenon. In the rest of the video, we'll look at some amazing trees, like those that have grown out of the heart of an ancient temple, or whose branches are spread so wide they look like a person opening their arms in welcome. But how are such things even possible? Stay with us until the end of this video as we uncover these secrets. Alright, let's move on to the trees of the Ta Prohm Temple in Cambodia, where the trees and the temple have become one. In the heart of Cambodia's jungles lies the historic Ta Prohm Temple, famous for its massive trees whose roots have wrapped around the temple. These trees, mostly of the Tetrameles nudiflora species, have grown into the walls in such a way that it seems like the temple and the trees are intertwined and have become one. The roots of these trees, like giant snakes, cover the walls and roof of the temple, giving this place a magical and mysterious feeling. The Ta Prohm Temple is a unique blend of nature and architecture, a symbol of the passage of time and the interaction between humans and the environment. However, the unchecked growth of the trees and their roots poses a threat to the temple. To maintain a balance between preserving the historical structures and caring for the trees, a Cambodian government agency called the Apsara Authority, in collaboration with Indian archaeological teams, implements precise restoration programs. These include pruning damaged branches, strengthening the roots, and preventing water from seeping into the sensitive parts of the temple. There is an old oak tree in a small village in France, inside whose trunk 2 small chapels have been built. This ancient and historic chapel, which is estimated to be between 800 and 1,200 years old, is where the local people traditionally hold their important religious ceremonies and spiritual gatherings. Interestingly, the incredibly thick trunk of this remarkable tree is so substantial that it provides more than enough spacious room to fully and comfortably accommodate this unique place of worship. In fact, its height is about 18 meters and the circumference of its trunk reaches 15 meters. The story of this tree is that in the 17th century, a lightning strike hit the tree and hollowed it out from the inside. The local priest considered this event a divine sign, and in 1696, he built a small church called Our Lady of Peace inside the hollow trunk of the tree. Later, a second church called the Hermit's Room was added on top of it. These churches are still active, and religious ceremonies are held inside them. It's interesting to know that during the French Revolution in 1793, the revolutionaries, who were opposed to religious symbols, wanted to burn this tree. However, a local teacher cleverly renamed the tree the Temple of Reason, and in doing so, saved it. Even now, this tree is still alive, but signs of aging and natural damage have appeared on it, and measures are being taken to preserve it. But now, let's move on to number 6 on our list. In Africa, there's a tree whose trunk bears a striking resemblance to an elephant. The grooves and bumps on the trunk look just like the lines and shape of an elephant's body. That's why this tree has been nicknamed the wooden elephant. This tree, which is also known as the one tree or Midimoja tree, is located in the Lewa Conservancy in Kenya. The elephant tree is not only similar to an elephant in appearance, but in various African cultures, it is also considered a symbol of resilience and endurance. This tree is an acacia tree. It is about 80 years old, and throughout its life, it has faced many challenges such as floods, wars, and elephant attacks. Interestingly, to protect this tree from elephants that are interested in eating its bark, its trunk has been covered with wire. Let's move on to the prison baobab tree, one of the most mysterious and at the same time saddest trees in the world. Both in terms of appearance and history. This tree is actually a special species of baobab with the scientific name Adansonia, which grows in Australia and Africa. But the most famous one, known as the prison tree, is located near the town of Derby in Western Australia. Now, why is it called the prison tree? The story isn't that simple. It's actually a mix of strange nature and a bitter history. In the 19th century, when Australia was still under British colonial rule, local police forces used the hollow, massive trunk of this tree as a temporary prison for indigenous Australians. The tree's trunk has a diameter of up to 6 meters. It had enough space to hold several people inside. Some local sources say that sometimes up to 10 people were imprisoned inside the trunk. It's worth noting that some accounts even claim that some of these people never made it out of the tree. The age of the prison tree in Australia is estimated to be around 1,500 years, and it's a tree that's not only gigantic but also kind of reminds you of the harshness of nature. Interestingly, this tree is still standing, but over the years, because of tourists' interest, it has been damaged, so now it's protected by a metal fence. Entering it is forbidden, but you can see it from the outside and think about the heavy history hidden in its trunk. Alright, now we're heading to China at an altitude of 1,600 meters in the Huangshan Mountains. There's one of the most famous trees in all of China, which looks like a person stretching out their hand in a welcoming gesture. That's why they call it the welcoming pine. They say this tree is over 1,000 years old and has been welcoming guests from all over the world for 1,000 years. It's interesting to know that every 6 years, they build a large scaffold around this tree to give it a full medical checkup. During this checkup, they examine the color and size of the tree's needle-like leaves. They also check the growth of the branches and the vitality of the buds. In addition, they inspect cracks and wounds on the trunk and branches, which could let in fungi or rainwater, as well as the amount of moss growth, since too much moisture can harm the tree. So far, this tree has had about 19 official guardians who examine it every day with a magnifying glass, and they even monitor the movement of nuisance animals like squirrels or monkeys that might bejewel its bark or break its branches. Interestingly, the tree's guardians even feed these animals so they won't come near the tree. Because the welcoming pine is a symbol of nature, friendship, and patience, and with such careful protection, it's meant to keep welcoming guests for many more years to come. Sometimes you've probably noticed that the trunks of some trees grow in a spiral shape. This is an interesting phenomenon that is often genetic. That means from the very beginning, it's in these trees' DNA for their trunks to be spiral-shaped, even how they twist. This spiral growth is an amazing survival strategy because it prevents branches from growing directly on top of each other. Instead, they're offset, which helps the tree absorb more sunlight. Usually, in a given area, about 90% of the tree species have trunks that twist in the same direction, like to the right or clockwise. But if just a few of these trees have trunks that twist the other way, like to the left or counterclockwise, that means they're among the rare genetic cases. But an important point about spiral trees is that the intensity or degree of trunk twisting depends on environmental conditions. For example, if a tree grows quickly and easily, its spiral will be less pronounced and more gentle, like a spring that has been stretched. But if the tree can't grow quickly, say, it's in the shade or exposed to strong winds, the spiral becomes much more intense, which makes the trunk stronger and more resistant. That's why trees that grow on windy hilltops usually have strong spirals, so they can resist breaking. But in regular forests, if you see a tree with a very intense spiral, it's probably much older than it looks from the outside. So, to sum up, the direction of the spiral is genetic, and the intensity of the spiral depends on the environment. And now we come to number 10 on our list. Trees whose trunks appear to have human faces are one of the most fascinating examples of a phenomenon called pareidolia. This is when our brain tries to find familiar images, like human faces, in unrelated things such as stains, clouds, or the texture of tree bark. Interestingly, scientists say that pareidolia is actually a useful ability. In our evolutionary past, being able to quickly recognize faces could have saved our lives. For example, in the dark, being able to tell whether a shadow is a predator or a human. Now, this ability still remains with us, but it shows up in a fun way in things like trees. Now let me give you a few famous examples of this in trees. The first one is the human-like tree in England. In one of London's old parks, there's an oak tree whose bark shows a complete human face. You can see the eyes, nose, and even a kind of frown or sadness. Many people believe this tree has a spirit, or that spirits live inside it. The next one is a tree with the face of Buddha in Thailand, at the Wat Mahathat Temple. In Ayutthaya, Thailand, the trunk of a tree has grown around the head of a Buddha statue. This is a strange seeing because it looks like the tree itself is embracing the face of Buddha. This image has become so famous that it is considered one of the symbols of Thailand. Additionally, in some forests of Oregon in the United States, especially after fires or when the bark decays, shapes appear on the trunks that really look like screaming or angry faces. Some people jokingly call them screaming trees. So, trees with faces are actually a kind of mirror. Things that are in our minds and imagination show themselves on the trunks of these trees. Maybe it's this mysterious feeling that makes it so you never get tired of seeing them. Out of all these strange trees I introduced to you, for me personally, the survivor tree of Oklahoma, which is a symbol of hope and resilience, is the most fascinating. You could say it's the first tree on my list. This tree reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope can illuminate the way. But what do you think? Which one of these trees did you find the most interesting? Write your opinion in the comments. Nature is truly full of incredible and profound mysteries. The remarkable trees we talked about, from the resilient survivor tree to the fascinating one with a human face, showcase the immense power and creative artistry of nature, which can sometimes leave us utterly in awe. So, every single corner of our earth can indeed hold a small or even a truly grand miracle.